Good afternoon, everyone. I want to welcome you to our webinar today, Refresh and Refurbish, Eldercare Design for Wellbeing. And first, I'd like to start off by thanking SWBR for being a sponsor with us and sponsoring this webinar today. The firm of SWBR is a supporter sponsor of Greenhouse this year and for 2023. If you don't know SWBR, they are a team that specializes in design of senior living communities that promote person-centered care and physical deinstitutionalization of long-term care environments. SWBR was an early adopter to greenhouse, small houses, and household-style environments that support elders. And their portfolio includes several national, transformative, and progressive skilled nursing and person-centered care senior environments. We thank them for their leadership. My name is Debbie Wiegand. I'm a project coach with the Greenhouse Project, and it is my pleasure to welcome and introduce today Amanda Loomis. Welcome, Amanda. This is going to be an exciting webinar. I'm so looking forward to doing this with you today.
Thank you for having me.
Sure. Amanda was inspired to be a part of the design community at a young age with a strong inclination towards creativity, art, and passion for helping others. She has turned those attributes into a career in interior design with a focus on creating supportive and inclusive interior environments. Throughout her career at SWBR, she's had the opportunity to work on a wide range of projects, which have sparked a growing passion in developing a specialty for designing senior living environments. And for Amanda, it's much more than just about design. It's about creating places that help elders lead full and meaningful lives. She served on the IIDA Rochester board as the communications chair and is now as the co-director, and volunteers her time to work with interior design students at the high school and college level. And I know Amanda and I have worked together on a previous project, one that's in the works now, and we did some work at the Pioneer Conference. I think you're going to find what she has to share with you today very insightful. Before we get kicked off and get started, just a few housekeeping things to discuss. We're going to ask that you use the Q&A box for your questions, and we'll be monitoring those today. I will be as your facilitator and host. You certainly are welcome to use the chat, and I see a couple of you are already, to share information with one another during the session, but only the Q&A box is going to be monitored for questions, and we will save time at the end to get to your questions. So please use Q&A box. Also, we're going to be launching a few polls during our session today. We'd love your insight, your input. So please listen for those and join us when it's time to participate in the polls. So with that, Amanda, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Sounds good. So I wanted to say thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here talking with you all about two of my passions, interior design and senior living. I'm hoping today to give you some information that will be helpful if you are going through a renovation project of your community, or if you just want to learn a little bit more about designing for seniors. When talking to Debbie and Kathleen about putting this presentation together, we pulled a few key features that we thought were most impactful to the well-being of the elders that live in these environments. And the team at the Greenhouse also wanted to capture some of the most frequently asked questions that they get or they've received over the past few years. And a lot of the questions that they've received are ones that we've received as well when we are starting the design process. So we narrowed that down to 4 different topics that we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about color, lighting, flooring, and furniture. And I will say that each of these topics very well could be a 1-hour session by themselves. So I will do my best to get as much information out there on these. And just know that if there's additional questions, please, again, like Debbie said, use that Q&A box and we can hope to get to that at the end.
Well, I think today, as we get started, one of the first things we wanted to do is get a feel from our audience by launching this first poll. So Janet is in the background on our team. She's launching the first poll, and we'd ask that you share with us your thoughts. Which area for you requires the most attention and capital reinvestment in your senior living environment? Is it flooring? Is it furniture? Is it color schemes, lighting, all of the above? So we'd be interested in hearing what you have to say is driving your capital reinvestment at this time. And as Amanda said, while we're waiting for you to vote, these different areas could probably be a topic unto themselves. There's so much to say about each one. They're all important. I don't know how anybody could just say this is the most important. I know when we're dealing with providers, they've got questions about all of this. I'll give you a chance to fill out your poll question. And I know several people are still logging on, so give you just a few more seconds. Janet, are we about ready to close the poll? All right, let's see what the results are. So it looks like well, all of the above. You know, I debated when we put this poll question in, should we give that as an option? Because I thought it might be the answer everybody went with. But let's see, in second place, furniture seems to be of high importance. Then flooring and color and lighting are in a close race with 11 and 12%. So I think that really helps us to form the conversation that we're going to go into now. So Amanda, take it away.
Sounds good. Okay, so we're going to start with color today. We're going to talk about color and the aging eye, what effects color can have, and where to start. So one of the most important factors in designing for seniors is understanding how they're going to perceive the space. And to be able to do that, you have to understand what issues they may be dealing with in order to accommodate that correctly. So some of the most common vision issues an older adult will face are macular degeneration, glaucoma, or cataracts. And these can cause a variety of different issues, including visual distortions, blurriness, or even decreased sense of colors or ability to perceive colors. And as we age, the eye also adds a yellow tint. So as you can see in this image, that can affect your ability to differentiate colors and patterns. And one thing that we do when we're designing projects in some cases is we will take a photo of the finished palette that we have put together or of a rendering of the space and put that yellow tint over it to really understand if we are accomplishing the things that we want to in the space and understand how that might be seen if that yellow tint is there. This just helps to understand if there's enough contrast for an elder to decipher between or where things start and where they stop. So color and the aging eye. Your ability to judge distances also becomes more difficult. So when selecting finishes and accessories, it is important to look at that contrast in colors and patterns. So you can see in the image on the left, contrast was taken into consideration with the plate setting. You can see that the plate setting in the table is contrasting to one another. And then in the image on the right, this is a very dramatic example. I'm sure none of you would do this, but this is just to show what a pattern can do, especially in a situation where there's a change in height and how that would be really hard to decipher where the stair ends and where it starts.
Amanda, when I look at this picture on the left with the plate, it reminds me of the plate study that was done, and it really began to cause me to think differently when I was involved in picking out plates and fixtures for our kitchen. So that's obviously a great contrast. And I think that plate study was about a white plate on a white background, and that when you change the color of the plate, people could see the food on the plate, they could distinguish what was there. And I believe it also led to an increase in food intake for elders. So color seems to have a real impact, and it can go all the way down to the nitty-gritty details of what color plate and saucers are you going to use.
Yes, definitely. All the details are very important and can sometimes be overlooked pretty easily. Color also is a great communication tool. It can assist in wayfinding when designing for seniors. So you can see that very clearly being used in these two images. The red on the left is clearly defining where that fireplace is. It draws your attention towards that spot. And on the right, they're using green as an accent outside of the resident door. So the entry to their space, they're helping differentiate where that door is in relation to the rest of the space. There was a study that I found that was done that I thought was kind of an interesting insight on color preferences for seniors. They asked their residents in two different formats. They did some printed out imagery, and then they also did some virtual reality where they put those goggles on residents. And they asked in a bedroom, in an activity space, what colors do you prefer? And they showed them all of these images, same exact space, just with some different color accents. And the findings showed that the preferences for warm and cool colors really do depend on the room type and the activities that are going to be going on in that space. So for activity rooms, which are places that are normally for those social activities, higher energy, warm colors were preferred, with the biggest preference near a yellow. And in the case of bedrooms, which are places meant to be more restful, lower energy spaces, the cooler colors were preferred, more near a green tone. So this just really shows that color preferences in interior spaces depend, again, on that room type and what they're going to be doing in that space. And if you look at the principles of color theory or ever heard of color psychology, it is proven that color can directly impact your mood. So warm tones, again, can create that energy, that excitement, or even stimulate appetite, while cool tones can create soothing and relaxing environments. So both of these kitchens, again, are the exact same layout, same exact furniture, everything. But you can see that the color of the tile and the color of the fabric on the chairs would make you feel a little bit different depending on what space you're in. So where is a good place to start when picking the color palette for your environment? What we like to do here at SWBR is consider the location of your building and the community around it. What is unique or interesting about the area that you're in? What are the styles of the homes that are close to your building? Or what are some themes that could be used that are familiar to the residents that would be living in this space? And this is an example that we created for a client that we're working with in Vermont, a greenhouse project. And they had a very clear definition of what they felt Vermont homes looked and felt like. So what we did with them was an exercise of pulling some inspiration photos and getting feedback from them on what images really felt like Vermont. And that allowed us to pull out colors that would seem familiar to the residents that would be moving into that space. So in each of these sections, we're going to do just some quick takeaways. If you take nothing else from this session, these are some good points to take. So color looks different to aging eyes. Important to pay attention to that contrast in the patterns. And color does affect how a person uses the space. So it's good to understand what activities will take place there. And I attached 2 images here that have both pros and cons in both of them. The image on the left, you can see that the wall surface, the laminate of the sink and the floor surface are a very similar color tone. So you can see how that might be hard to differentiate between those materials. And then the image on the right has a very clear delineation of space that you know when walking by that wall where you are, and it helps to orient where you are in the space.
You know, my comment on your pictures here, Amanda. One, I'm so glad that you put the toilet contrast picture up here. There are so many times when I know we're trying to be conscious about cost, and the flooring, the back wall of a toilet, and the color of the toilet seat cannot be differentiated. And when you think about, we're designing for elders and we want to maximize their independence, we take that away when we compromise on these color schemes. So to emphasize that contrast is so incredibly important so that someone can continue to see where they're going and be able to use the toilet, the sink, all of those things. And then my compliments on the color red. It's not a color that you normally think of using in an environment where you're living. And yet I've seen this done over and over again. And it really does impact the mood of where people are spending their time. So sometimes we got to think outside the box.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. When I first saw that red color, I myself thought, wow, that's a bold color. But you know, it does work for what the intention was for the placement of that color. So next, I'm going to jump into lighting. So we're going to talk about color temperature, access to natural light, lighting and safety, and creating variety and levels of lighting. So eldercare environments can be challenging for lighting design. A lot of the part is due to the fact that they are dealing with a lot of those vision impairments or even disruptions to rhythm due to Alzheimer's or dementia. So that vision in dim lighting, reading small print, distinguishing between colors, and transitioning between bright and dark spaces can all be very problematic. So one thing to understand is that the color temperature of your lighting can have an effect on how an elder uses that space. So typically it's recommended between 2,900 and 3,500 K. But there are fixtures now that you can see in these images that are actually tunable. So that color temperature of the light can be shifted throughout the day. These ones are specifically to assist with circadian rhythm. So you can see that it may be a cooler and darker atmosphere in the morning, and then it becomes brighter as the day moves on, similar to what's happening naturally outside. But you can also see what a cool light in the same environment would look like versus a warm light. The design of senior care environments is regulated at the state level, and a majority of states use what's called the Fti Guidelines. For lighting, these cover recommended levels of light, as well as things like daylighting in the common area spaces like the living room spaces, activity rooms, and dining spaces. And if daylighting isn't available, the electric lighting that's provided really needs to also promote that circadian response that I was talking about, that natural rhythm that daylight provides from dark to light. And access to natural light is very important, not only for those reasons, but for a myriad of other health reasons. And I listed a few here. And making us happier seems like a good enough reason to me. And while lighting design for these environments typically emphasizes daylight, like we just talked about, and higher light levels, minimizing the glare and shadows that those solutions may cause is equally important. And creating that nice equal distribution of lighting in the space helps avoid those hot spots or the strobe-like effects that you can see in the left image here on the wall and the floor. So having more light is great, but understanding how it affects the rest of the space is important as well. Another key consideration for senior living is visual adaptation. So how is the eye adapting from one light level to another to maintain that acuity? For many people, and not just older adults, it's really hard to adapt between a really bright sunshine lit space to a dim hallway space. And so in those transition spaces, it may be something good to consider a higher light level in those transition spaces to help assist with that adaptation. And in all spaces that we're designing, not just in the kitchen or dining space, a variety of lighting sources should be included to allow for flexibility. So for example, in this photo, there's 3 different types of light sources that are shown. We have natural lighting coming in from the outdoors, as well as task lighting underneath the cabinetry and independent lights over the island. And then we have a general ambient light made by those recessed cans up in the ceiling. And some key takeaways, again, for lighting, paying attention to the color temperature and how it can change how you see a space. Access to natural light is very important, and avoiding those shadows and sharp transitions between dark and light. So our next section, and I'm sorry, I'm going super fast. Our next section today is flooring. So we're going to talk about life cycle costs, maintenance, what materials may go where, carpet versus resilient, and things to avoid.
And we want to go ahead and interject a poll question here. So Janet, if you'll put up the poll question, and I'll have you take note, there's two parts to this. So the first question is, how often is flooring in bedrooms or living room areas being replaced in your setting? So are you doing it every 5 years or more often, every 10, every 20 to 25? I'm not sure what choice 4 was. I don't think that was supposed to be in there. So just one of the first, which of the top 3 bullets would you choose? And then on the second question, do you have a capital replacement plan for flooring and furniture? And just a quick yes or no. So we give you a couple of, or give you a minute or so to fill that out. And don't think we're going to leave you hanging, because we have some information to share with you about replacement costs after this, but we'd like to get your feedback on what your experience is. So Janet, I would say if it looks like most people have answered, you can go ahead and close the poll. All right. So it looks like the leading answer is every 10 years or so. And that probably depends on what kind of flooring we've got in place, right? Amanda, you're going to speak to that.
Yeah.
A close second is every 20 to 25, and then about 17% say every 5 years or so. The second question, do you have a capital replacement plan? Well, 60% do and 40%, no, I'm sorry, 40% do and 60% do not. So that being said, Amanda, let's talk a little bit about life cycle costs and materials. You've got a lot of good information here.
Sure. All right. So one of the biggest factors that comes up in every selection is always budget, right? So you only have a certain amount of money that you can spend on this project, and you want to make it count. That can sometimes create a very narrow view to the selection process. And you may end up saying, let's find the cheapest material we can put in that looks decent and it'll last us, for the time being. In reality, we know that sometimes that's your only option if you have a tight budget and you have a tight time constraint. But ideally, when you're looking at replacing your flooring, you want to consider all phases of that product's life cycle. And most of the time, people will consider that cost of that new carpet, the cost of installing that new carpet. But you don't want to stop at that point because that could result in more expenses down the line. And you want to make sure that you're looking at what it's going to cost to clean and maintain that floor. Will there be regular repair costs? And once that floor is at the end of its life, how much is it going to cost to replace it? I have included here some cost estimates provided by a consulting firm to compare some different flooring types. This is showing per square foot how much it costs to purchase and install, how long it is going to last before you need to replace it, and how much per year are you spending to maintain that floor. And of course, these numbers are not completely accurate. There's a lot of variables in where you're located, the market conditions, and the type of material or manufacturer you choose. But this gives you a good idea of what types of materials may cost more to install up front and what materials are going to last longer.
Amanda, as you transition to the next slide, I want to let our audience know, because there was a question, the slides and the recording of this webinar will be sent to everyone afterwards. So there's a lot of information on your slide. So I just wanted people to know you're still going to get all of this afterwards.
Yes, there's lots of information, and I am not touching on every single piece, but I did make these knowing that I could share them with you and hoping that these would be a good resource for you after this webinar. So I've also included here some cost estimates on how much it costs to maintain the product, or I'm sorry, not cost. I've included some considerations for maintaining the product and what it takes to keep that product in good shape over time. So let's look, for example, at a comparison between a tile, a porcelain tile at the top, and a VCT, a vinyl composition tile. So the maintenance for those two look pretty different. A tile, you're going to be doing that daily maintenance, cleaning, and maybe some deep scrubbing every couple of months or yearly, depending on how much that floor is used. For a VCT, the maintenance will look a little bit different. So you'll still have that daily maintenance, but you will also have to do some waxing and buffing because it has a top finish coat on it. And that could result in having to shut down a certain portion of your building for your maintenance staff to complete that process. And that can be really hard in an active environment where residents are living in that space. So that's something to consider when picking a floor finish. When looking at putting new flooring in your space, understanding the function and activities that are going to occur in that space is a great starting point. Same with when you're picking colors. For example, I've shown a greenhouse project here that we're working on, and this is kind of typical layout. It has all of the typical spaces that you will see in a greenhouse project. And I am showing here what we at SWBR would use as standard materials for these spaces. Of course, every project is a little bit different, and the team has a lot of say in what we put into the space. But when selecting all of these, we're considering how much foot traffic is going to be going over the floor material. Is it in an area that will have water or food consumption? And will there be any carts coming through the space? That's an important question to ask. So you can see LVT running through a lot of the common area spaces here in the kitchen, in the dining room, the foyer, the pantry. That's ideal for us for areas that have potential for spills. That makes it a nice smooth surface that's easy to clean. And in spaces where we may want a little bit more cushion underfoot or acoustics, that's where we've shown transition into a carpet. In the hallways, the living room space or hearth room, and some of the bedrooms.
I love the way that you've been able to show a diagram of what goes where and some of your comments about why. And we could spend an entire session on this, but really trying to understand what's the intent and the benefit of that flooring to that particular space and matching up the values for the organization and the elder, while also considering the maintenance costs and the durability factors. I just remember as an administrator, it just felt like as soon as we got finished stripping and waxing sheet vinyl, I was being told we need to do this again. And I'm like, didn't we just do this? Because it is such an ordeal and such a lift for an organization to handle the kind of ongoing maintenance that's occurring. So anyway, I know you're going to get to more details about that.
No, that's a great comment. And one of the biggest questions or common questions that Debbie receives a lot in her team, carpet versus LVT. And this was one that we also receive quite frequently when we're starting to think about a renovation project in an existing senior community. And there's pros and cons to both materials. And each material type can look very different depending on the manufacturer that you're going with. But in general, carpet, you're going to have some better acoustics. It's going to be more cushioning for falls, and it feels like home. If you ask most people what flooring is in their bedroom at home, they will say carpet. It's harder to remove those spills and stains, and it has a shorter lifespan. Versus LVT, it has that ease of maintenance. It's easier to clean. It has that longer lifespan, but acoustically, it's not as great. So you really have to understand what your team can maintain well over time, and what your priorities for that space are. Another thing that we consider when we're choosing between the two is if we are reusing some existing furniture in the space, we want to make sure that we're able to provide that contrast between the floor and the furniture again. So if we have a wood tone piece of furniture, we want to make sure that if we are using LVT, that wood tone on the floor is contrasting enough that they would be able to tell the difference.
So a couple of questions for you, Amanda.
Mm-hmm.
When it comes to carpet, I've seen places that have used carpet tiles, and they've invested in carpet tiles because if there is a spill, something that they can't extract, then they can peel just that one tile up or a couple of tiles, thinking that that then contributes to the longevity of the overall carpet. So what's your thought on carpet tile?
So yes, carpet tile we have been using much more frequently. You are able to remove just one piece rather than pulling up. Broadloom comes in rolls of like a 12-foot wide piece of material. So it is easier if something does happen on the carpet to replace a small section versus a big section. Carpet tile and broadloom can both come with moisture barriers underneath, but carpet tiles are more frequently standard with that moisture barrier on the backing. So that's why we've been using it more frequently, as well as the patterns and colors that are available in carpet tile. There's so much more variety than if you are going with a broadloom carpet. So it gives you a little bit more choice in what that looks like.
And then you've touched on this just a little bit, but most people in long-term care are going to go here. And that is, what about infection control issues in carpet, meaning specifically incontinent issues and having to replace carpet? So I know there's newer products out on the market. We don't have to go into a lot of detail, but any thoughts you want to share with the audience about that particular subject?
Sure. So that's normally the contradicting argument that we hear when we want to specify carpet in a bedroom space. What about incontinence? What about all of those issues relating to toileting? And I would say the carpet tiles and broadloom again can have that moisture barrier, so you're not having that go through to the substrate of the floor. They can also have different finishes on the surface of the carpet that can make it easier to clean. And then the construction of the carpet, and again, I won't be a nerd and go into the construction of carpet, but there's different constructions of carpet that you can get that would be better for cleaning and make it easier. So instead of having like a tipped sheared carpet where the loops are cut, you could have a full loop carpet and that protects it for longer.
Which is why you work with someone who has all of your insight and experience, right? To help pick and choose the right products. So thank you for that.
Nobody needs to know that much about carpet, I don't think. Okay, so in flooring transition, when we're talking about all of these different flooring materials in one space, you're going to run into points where you need to transition between one material to another, and they may not be the same height. So there's a couple different ways to address that I've shown here. If you're going from a thinner material like a sheet vinyl or a thinner LVT to a carpet that's a little bit thicker, you may run into the need for a resilient transition, which is this image to the far left. And I'm sure you've seen these in your communities from one floor to the next. One thing that I just wanted to quickly note on these types of transitions is you really do have to pay attention to the details. These can end up being a tripping hazard. So when you're looking at those, you want to make sure that you're getting something that is ADA compliant. So I pulled two different resilient transitions from the same manufacturer here. And you can see that they're both going from a 1/4 inch thickness to a 0.08 thickness. But one is not ADA compliant. One is too high. That would cause a tripping hazard. So those little details that you may just tell the contractor, just pick what works, really are important to pay attention to. The middle one here is showing a different approach to those transition in heights. This is a little bit of extra prep work underneath that thinner material to slope or feather it up and level it out to that same height as the thicker material. and you could have a very thin transition just between the two different types of finishes, but a very level surface to go over. And then the third, of course, is the most ideal situation is your flooring heights are the same height. And I put this in just to note that there are a lot of commercial flooring manufacturers now that have carpet and LVT products that are exactly the same height, like 4 to 5 millimeters in thickness. And they can butt right up to each other with no transition needed. So there has been developments in flooring that could assist in this issue. And then when thinking about a different space, a transition between maybe the bedroom space to that private bathroom, in all of the greenhouse projects, obviously you have that bedroom and your private bathroom and private shower. So that's transitioning from a carpet or an LVT to potentially a tile surface. So there's a couple different ways, again, that you can do this. The top image is showing a metal transition between the two. And then the bottom image is showing a stone or a marble threshold between the two materials. We typically will specify the upper images, the metal transition. It's a little bit simpler, but another reason we do that is the stone transition, even though it could meet the ADA standards of how high it is, sometimes it is still difficult to go over that, let's say if you're in a wheelchair. And again, thinking about the color in the space, sometimes that little chunk of a different color can be disorienting. So trying to avoid all of those different colors right next to each other is normally the right way to go. Another thing just to mention and on this slide is the transition between the main area in the bathroom to the shower area. So in this image, you can see that it's a completely flush transition to the shower. There's no lip there at all. Obviously, this is the ideal situation that we try to do as much as possible, especially in greenhouse projects. This main floor area will be a larger scale porcelain tile, and then it'll transition in the shower area to a smaller scale tile to allow for more slip resistance with the extra grout. And all of that will slope to the drain that's at the back of the shower. When we look to avoid certain things in the flooring selections in senior environments, these are a couple things that you should look to avoid. Sometimes, especially in elders that have dementia, some of these busier or disorienting patterns can start to shift and change, and they may look like something different than what you intentioned them to look like. It may look like something that they feel like they have to pick up or they have to avoid. So those we do try to stay away from. And then glossy or highly reflected finishes that you can see in this image where maybe it's a really highly waxed surface. You can see how the light hitting that floor can create different shapes and again, those strobes or orbs of light. And that could be something that's really either scary or something that people feel like they have to avoid. And the gloss on it also can sometimes look like water, if like a spill that they also would have to avoid, or something that's slippery. And then the last image, this is a very dramatic version of this, but too much contrast can be a hindrance as well. So if you're going from something that's really light to something that's really dark, especially a black floor, that can be visualized as literally a black hole, something that they may fall into. So those are things to avoid when choosing floor selections. And a few key takeaways from flooring. Don't get stuck on that upfront cost. Make sure that you're, again, doing your research on the full life cycle of that product, because it will be important to your budget later on. And avoiding those tripping hazards and falls by paying attention to the transition and colors and patterns. And you can see on the left here, that's that carpet and LVT material that is the same height. So there's no need for that transition between the two. And then on the right, this is just another image of material that may be one that you want to avoid. We have heard of some of these types of lines in carpets can also be visualized as like snakes or animals or something that's in the carpet. That can be very scary, especially to someone that has Alzheimer's or dementia. So our last section here today is furniture. So we're going to talk about commercial versus residential, what features and dimensions to look for, what to consider when selecting a fabric, maintenance and infection control, and again, life cycle and warranties.
And before we jump into this part, we have a poll that we want to launch. This is our last poll. So if you'll take a second and answer this, which factor has the greatest impact on the product that you may choose related to furniture and flooring? Is it the cost of the product cost? Is it the durability, life cycle cost, infection control, or maintenance? And you do have to choose one. We didn't give the option of all of the above, although they're all important or we wouldn't have mentioned them. So we'll give you just a few seconds to fill this out. Then Amanda's going to finish up her presentation, and we will have time for questions at the end. And if we don't get to them all, we will reach out to you individually. So if you want to go ahead and close that poll. Can you close that poll for us, Janet? Right, let's see what we have. So looks like durability is really important. That's good to hear. Then followed by infection control. We are just coming out of a pandemic, so I'm sure that's hot on everyone's mind. Looks like followed then by life cycle cost, and maintenance and product cost are tied at 10%. So it's not all about the cost of the product. So I think we've got some really good critical thinkers here on this call today.
That is great to hear. Here we go. So commercial furniture, also known as contract furniture, is built to handle the wear and tear of a high traffic environment, whereas residential furniture is not typically built to the same standards and requirements, because it's not meant to withstand all of that high traffic use. So when we're talking about designing for senior environments, obviously our main priorities are keeping the resident safe and comfortable, and that's why we would recommend using commercial furniture when you're looking at replacements. So I'm going to go through some features and dimensions when looking at certain pieces of furniture. And I will not be touching everything on these slides again, but these will be shared with you. But I just want to touch on some key things when you're looking at replacing these certain pieces of furniture. So when you're looking at a dining chair, some key things to look for here relate to making it easier for the resident to get independently out of that chair. And so that would be features like the seat height, the depth of that seat, and having those firm arms that, again, are easy to clean. Those are some key features that you should be looking for when selecting a dining chair. And there's other things in relation to cleanability, like having that open back that you can wipe crumbs through or easily clean. And then there's always, with all furniture, there's ways that you can customize it to make it better. And one that I'm showing here is a hand grip at the top that you could put on a commercial piece of furniture. Many manufacturers offer it. That makes it easier to move that piece of furniture from one space to the next. At many greenhouse homes, there is a kitchen island. So the chairs for that island are a little bit different than a dining chair. They'll be at a different height for at least a portion of it. And one thing that we see as something that's overlooked sometimes is the height of that counter. A lot of people think about a counter that you have stools at home, and a lot of the times that's a bar height counter, and that requires a different height stool. So just looking at a 36-inch high counter, you'll need to look for a counter height chair or stool. And a 42-inch high counter, you'll want to look for a bar height chair or stool. And it also is important to pay attention to those little details. Like you could see maybe there's some trim work that you're forgetting about, and that makes it hard for that chair to push underneath. For dining tables, most greenhouse projects have a family style or communal style table, but there's other options when it comes to tables. A pedestal based table or a 4-leg table are also options. Key things to look at when you're looking at selecting a table are all of the clearances underneath for meeting ADA standards. So you can see that there's a minimum clearance from the floor to the bottom of the table, as well as a clearance, if you're doing that pedestal base, from the edge of the table to that obstruction for the knee clearance. And one thing I just wanted to note in regards to tables, one common thing that we have when people are debating between a pedestal base and a 4-leg base, it comes down to, are there a lot of residents there that will be in wheelchairs? And sometimes that foot pedal of the wheelchair can extend a little bit too far, that it would start to hit that pedestal base, and it would make it so that resident is not all the way up to the table. Also, sometimes there's issues with the arms of a wheelchair hitting that tabletop, and again, they can't fully get up to that table. So there is an option for a wheelchair height table where it gives you a couple extra inches for that wheelchair to slide under. When looking at a lounge chair, very similar to things that you'd be looking for in a dining chair. Again, that seat height, those arms that are firm and easy to grab onto. But in lounge furniture, one other thing that we're looking for is a supportive cushion. A lot of people think in lounge furniture, they want to get the comfiest, softest thing they can get. But really in a senior environment, you want a little bit more of a firm cushion. Again, that helps ease them independently being able to get in and out of that chair. And same goes for the back of that chair. Nothing too cushioned that they would start to slump back into, and it would be hard for them to get out. When talking about recliners, there's a couple different types of recliners that you could put in a senior environment. The pushback, typically with this one, this is something that's used in low acuity environments. They need to be able to use their own strength and body weight to push that back and have the recliner come up. So that sometimes is not the right option for your population. Typically, we will end up using a manual lever recliner. Again, that is provided and requested a lot just to give that elder the most independence possible, and most elders are capable of using that manual lever, and it's familiar to what they may have had at home. And the one on the right is a power lift recliner. This one may be beneficial for certain environments like a rehab environment or a more high acuity environment. That just makes it easier for that person, again, to get out of the seat. So when we're talking about putting all of this furniture into a space, for example, a hearth room or den space, you can see in this photo, this is a greenhouse hearth room. It's important to plan the placement and quantity of furniture to allow for circulation around it. So you want to make sure that you have paths at least 3 feet wide that people can walk through comfortably. And you want to plan for a radius where a wheelchair could turn around in the space. Resident bed. So this one, you can really get into the weeds. So I'm gonna just touch on 4 things to look for. Looking for weight capacity, warranty, and the height that that bed can travel up and down. And then, is it able to expand in width or in length? So this is showing a standard bedroom space here, how we would typically lay out a bedroom space. You have the bed there with a good sight line to the toilet, and then you can see we're providing some proper clearances between the bed and other obstructions in the space, like the dresser or the outside wall. One thing to note that I like to talk to people about is the size of the bed. So having those expandable beds really provides that flexibility for each resident. And if you're thinking about what kind of bed you are using now, are you using a twin size bed? Maybe not. So maybe that would be strange for you to go from a queen or a king size bed to a twin size bed again. So just thinking about those things. When considering fabrics for a project, again, this could be a whole session, but this scale, pattern, color, those are all very important. Making sure that, again, that contrast between the furniture fabric and the flooring, or the furniture fabric and the wall, is enough that they can tell the difference between the two. So they can judge when they're trying to sit down on that seat where the seat is. When choosing a fabric, also in these types of environments, it is important to choose something that's easy to clean, has that stain resistance potentially built in, and it has a certain level of durability. And a lot of fabrics, the way they judge durability is called double rubs. So we would typically recommend at least 50,000 of those. So when you're looking at a specs of a fabric, you can look for something like that. And some fabrics as well have a coating or a barrier on the outside. So you can see the one on the left is a vinyl or polyurethane that has a coating that makes it easy to wipe down. And then the one on the right is called a Krypton fabric, which has a finish that makes liquid or water bead up on the surface. So if you get to it soon enough, it's easy to wipe clean.
Amanda, if I could just interject, I know we're going to go a little long, so I want to let the audience know if you have to jump off, that's fine. We're going to go ahead and finish up the rest of this presentation, and we will go through questions. We will keep recording, and it'll be sent out to you so that you'll have a chance to hear the answers during the Q&A. So just want to let the audience know before they get to the top of the hour.
Okay, thank you. I'm almost done, I promise. So just talking about life cycles and warranties of furniture, these, just like the flooring, it really depends on where and how you're using it, but these are just some estimated lifespans for furniture. And when thinking about what furniture you're selecting, the warranty is something that you should look at the fine print and see what it does actually cover. A lot of the times it's only going to cover a manufacturer's defects, so something that is defective from the factory, nothing that happens once you're the owner of it. And some key takeaways for furniture are the seat height, those sturdy arms, and a cleanable fabric are very important. And then the function of those pieces need to play an equal role in making furniture selections, not just the aesthetics of what it looks like. So you can see on the left a poly armchair versus something that's a painted or coated metal. And then the image on the right, I just wanted to note that in the variety, and maybe someone's bringing in their own furniture and making sure that it hits the same standards that you want to create a safe environment. And then lastly, I just wanted to finish today by saying good design is not done in a bubble. So when you're making all of these renovation selections, it really is important to have all the stakeholders involved, not just maybe the administration team, but getting caregiver, elder families, and the maintenance team's input on decisions is really important. And everyone brings different value to the table. So thank you for joining. I apologize for going right to the last second, but do we want to open it up for questions?
Tell you what, let's go ahead and do a few of our promo announcements,
Sure.
and then we'll get to our questions for those that can hang on. So just wanted to let everyone know, if you aren't aware yet, the Greenhouse Project and Pioneer Network have formally aligned, and we'd like for you to continue to follow us and stay tuned for more information that'll be coming as far as new and exciting initiatives that we'll be rolling out in the next quarter and the next year. So if you haven't heard, we wanted to share that with you. And next, just letting you know, we will be at Leading Age. So if you would like to talk with us, let us know ahead of time. We'd be happy to set up an appointment or come by our booth. You've got the booth number there at 1429. We'd love to see you in person. And we have a few webinars that we are going to get in before the end of the year. So I'm going to go through these quickly, but I'll let you know that you go to our website and you can register. We'll also be sending this out to you in other manners, so you can register at your leisure. We have a session coming up September 27th called Creating a Coaching Culture. And this is the first in a series of our fall webinars. It is going to be next Tuesday, and we'd ask that you join our education leaders to learn more about person-directed leadership and how it makes a difference in your community. The next one is about workforce on October the 4th. And, there's a reason why greenhouse homes have 4.5 times lower the workforce turnover than traditional nursing homes. So it's a small investment to learn what the big dividends might be behind that. So join us for that session if you can. And then also on October 11th, Alex Spanko from our team will be talking about communicating for policy success. And he says it doesn't have to be scary. So come learn more about how you can communicate for policy. That is all of our announcements. So for those of you that have been patiently waiting and holding on for question and answer, let's get to our expert, Amanda. Some of these things we've talked about and have been answered, but here's one. Are there any special considerations for those living with dementia in these environments? Would you design it differently?
Yes and no. We do try to design environments that would be good for all seniors, whether they have dementia or not. But if it is a certain environment that's specific to maybe a memory care community, then there may be things that we pay closer attention to. And those are things that I kind of touched on, but color and pattern are really important when we're looking at memory care environments. That ability to differentiate and the need for additional wayfinding, color is really helpful in assisting with that. So putting certain colors in certain places can help them understand where they are in the space. And then patterns, a lot of those issues with patterns are very, very common with people that do have dementia. So those are things that you want to look to avoid.
All good comments, probably a whole other webinar, right?
Sure.
So this is about carpet versus vinyl in the hallways. Vinyl can be noisy, in cold. What are your thoughts? What's the best flooring for hallways? What do you do about it? If you're not putting in carpet, what do you do about acoustics?
So again, it's just determining what's right for your community. If we are putting LVT in the space, there's other ways that we can address acoustics. There are LVTs also that do have acoustical properties.
Okay.
So there could be acoustic backing to that product, or there's some that have acoustics built into the actual LVT. And then we can use the other finishes of the space to address those acoustics. So having maybe an acoustical ceiling tile or some acoustical material on the wall surfaces. Those are also great options that if LVT is really the best for your community, there's other ways we can address those acoustic issues.
All the reasons why we would work with someone like you to find those things out. Does luxury vinyl tile have cushioning?
Some does. Just like some have that extra acoustical backing, some has extra cushioning for that high foot traffic or a more comfortable feeling under your foot. So there is some that do, but you have to make sure you're specifically looking for that product.
Okay. Now, I'm not going to know what this means, but I'm sure you do. Do you use low VOC products? I don't know what a VOC product is.
Yeah, so that is the bad fumes that come off of a product.
Okay.
So a lot of the times people think of low VOC, they're thinking about paint, but all of those other products we talked about, flooring and furniture, those also have those fumes that come off of them. And typically here, we do try to pay attention to things like that and make sure that we're providing the safest material for our products or our projects, and also the most sustainable material, something that potentially maybe could be recycled at the end of its life.
Okay. There was a question about transitions of flooring, but I think you've addressed that. Have you had the opportunity to specify the E-Core product or similar rubber-backed heterogeneous sheet vinyl?
I don't think that specific floor,
Okay.
but we have specified floors like that in the past. And that is one product that has that extra cushion underneath. And you can have that wood look surface. So it's almost like a sheet vinyl on the top with the cushion that you would normally see in a fitness flooring. So it's the combination of both. So we have used flooring similar to that in rehab spaces, and they work really well for that.
Okay. I'll take a shot at answering this one, but correct me if I'm wrong. It says, how do you handle water control in the flush shower? What I've seen are the trench drains, so that there's a zero threshold. They can put them in the front or they can put them off to the side or the back. Is there anything else you would recommend?
Yeah, it really comes down to the drainage and the slope. So you're going to want to make sure there's the proper sloping. So all of that water is going to wherever the drain is located.
Okay. The questions continue to come in, so I'm going to keep going.
Okay.
Do you hear that it's easier for elders with knee impairments to get off of a stool versus rising from a chair?
I have heard that. I have heard that in rehab environments, sometimes a little bit higher seat height can be helpful because they're not going down quite as far. So that knee is maybe not at that 90 degree, maybe it's up a little bit. And that just assists a little bit in that transition from a full seated position to standing.
Okay.
Again, so it's really important to understand who you're designing for so you can make those little adjustments.
What do you recommend for a rocking chair, or do you recommend rocking chairs?
We typically don't put rocking chairs in our environments. There's just so many things that could go wrong.
Yeah.
Not just in someone falling out of it, but the construction of it can very easily go wrong. So I've not yet found a commercial grade rocking chair, but I will share that if I do.
All right. This question says, are there hospital beds that can accommodate moving through a 36-inch door? One of the things I've seen is a door then with a panel that can be stationary, or you can open it up, which allows for that wider bed.
Mhm.
Any other thoughts on?
Yeah, that's exactly what I would say, because typically a bed will be about 36 inches wide. So we will do that small leaf, and sometimes that small leaf is actually required in certain skilled environments. But that allows for a bed to come through and be moved into a different space.
So staying with the bed theme, this person says they want to avoid traditional hospital beds. What are some options that still adhere to positioning and care needs? And I know that what I've seen, especially when you have private rooms, is you do have that flexibility for a wider bed. Because you mentioned how many of us are really sleeping on a twin size bed anymore? Not many. So, and those 42-inch beds do have the ability to go up and down, and head height comes up, foot. Any other comments? Do you have contacts with those
Yeah.
type of manufacturers?
So there are other bed types that don't necessarily have to be a fully medical bed, but even if it is a medical bed, because you need some of those functions of the bed, you do have the ability to change out the headboard and the footboard. And you can see, we can't really see in this picture, but this bed or bed similar to it, we've done in a medical bed, but we've changed the headboard and footboard to have a little bit more residential looking feel, but it still functions the way that you might need it to. So that would probably be my recommendation.
Okay. Any recommended readings or info to help highlight the importance of aesthetics to our team? Anything like that in your resources? Anything you want to recommend?
I don't think I have anything in my resources here, but in the follow-up, maybe I could include a couple of things.
Okay. All right. All right. There was one other question on rocking chairs. What about rocking chairs on a flat platform? Does that change any of your thoughts about rocking chairs, or are they still a little scary?
To me, they're a little scary.
Okay.
I have seen them in environments. I have seen them in memory care environments, probably more often than others, because the goal was they want to help trigger those memories of rocking in a rocking chair. But I personally don't specify them.
So, Amanda, thank you so much. Obviously, your expertise came shining through in this presentation. We are going to send out the recording, send out the slides, and if anybody needs to reach out to Amanda or myself with anything more specific, we're happy to interact and share. We've shared our contact information with you, so feel free. Again, Amanda, thank you so much. We really appreciate your time today. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Thanks for joining.
Bye-bye.